6.4, Step 1, Descriptive Language and Atmosphere. Students will be able to explain how atmosphere is created through descriptive language. This video is to help you look at the extract that is in 6.4, Step 2 in your packet, called Divisions Upon Greek Ground, which is from a larger work, we're told, from Prospero's Cell, a nonfiction work by Lawrence Durrell. This was the other passage that was in 2021, and we're going to spend a lot of time looking at it. Now, the key with the passage, of course, is the guiding question. The guiding question asks, if you look at it, how does the author use descriptive language to create atmosphere? So that's where I'm getting this from. We want to focus on descriptive language and atmosphere because a former test asked about it, and maybe that will happen again. It's a good thing for us to understand, and like I said, it might come up on your exam, and so you'll be ready to answer this as well. It also translates to other types of analysis, evaluation, and interpretation really well, so it'll be a useful exercise regardless. All right, let's get started. Taking some notes. First of all, what is atmosphere? Atmosphere is the not necessarily emotional feeling of an environment as constructed by a writer's description of the environment and the objects within that setting. Think of how we normally use the word atmosphere. You might say it was a really tense atmosphere in the room. Times Square has a really bustling atmosphere. The haunted house has a really creepy atmosphere. That is really what we're looking at when we're looking at literature. Atmosphere is almost always used to describe the feeling that you get from a particular place, like the awkwardness, the bursting energy, or the creepiness that's imposed upon us in a physical environment, situation, or space. The room where there's an awkwardness, Times Square where it's bustling, or the haunted house. So it makes sense that setting, environment of a text is what establishes the atmosphere, right? And so that's really what we're focused on when we're looking at atmosphere. We're looking at how is this place and time and all the things in it described, and what kinds of feelings are created in it. If you think about some of the atmospheres that were in the books that we just read, Sag Harbor, for example, you might describe parts of those books, certain scenes in that book, or certain scenes in Sag Harbor as being blissful, carefree, like when they go to the beach, or when Benji goes to the concert towards the end of the book. But then there are other times when the atmosphere is quite different, when he's at home and the atmosphere is volatile and stifling because his dad is there barbecuing and drinking too much and about to explode, and then eventually does. So those are some different kinds of words you can use to describe atmosphere. How about the book Men We Reaped? We talked about atmosphere when we read that book. The atmosphere is created mostly from the description of DeLille, Mississippi, and that sort of double feeling that we get there, that ambivalence, feeling two ways at the same time, of being both oppressive and comforting. Not only the lack of opportunity is oppressive, but just the heat and all of those things combined to make it feel oppressive. But then there's also that comforting aspect, because this is home for the narrator, for Ward, and this is where her family is. All right, so those are different ways to describe atmospheres from things we've already read. Let's talk a little bit about this word mood, okay? Mood and atmosphere are similar, all right? Think of atmosphere as being more focused on setting than mood is. Mood is bigger. And I'll give you a definition here for mood. Mood is the emotional complexion of a work, the internal feeling a reader has while reading the work, and it can be influenced by atmosphere, the way that the setting is described in the book, but it's also influenced by everything else in the book. So it's influenced by the characters and what they say and what they do, and how the sequence of the events is created, the structure. All of these different things affect the mood. Everything does. Whereas atmosphere is more specific just to setting and environment. All right. The difference between atmosphere, mood, and tone is the next question. And tone is doesn't really come up in this extract. There's no question about tone. But maybe there will be a question on your paper one about tone. And so I want to make sure that you can answer a question about it as well. Tone and mood are often used incorrectly by students. And like they use them interchangeably. And you cannot use those two interchangeably. Atmosphere and mood are very similar. Mood and tone are very different. All right? So let's talk tone. What is it? It is the speaker's attitude. It's how the person talking feels, either about the subject matter they're talking about, or the person they're talking to, whatever they are feeling. That is what tone is, okay? So you can think of mood as more what the reader is feeling, and tone as more what the speaker is feeling. Now, we have different kinds of speakers in texts. You might have the narrator in a prose text. You have the speaker in a poem. And you might have characters speaking in drama. So keep that in mind, that we can have tone from all of those different people who are speaking. The tone is revealed through the language that the speaker uses. So whatever specific things that they say, how they say it, all of those kinds of things. And you have to look carefully for those to identify tone. Some words you might use to define tone are objective, detached, reflective, lighthearted, ironic. Those are all some good tone words. So it's showing the attitude of whoever's talking, whether it's the narrator or a character. It's how they feel. And that affects you as the reader. It affects mood, but it is not the same thing. All right, let's move on. Oh, I wanted to give you an example, I think, of tone and mood. Let's see, do I have that in here? Oh, here it is. It's in the wrong spot. And so this comes from a book called The Curious Incident of the Dog at Nighttime, which is narrated by a character who is on the autism spectrum. So they don't always have a good understanding of what other people are feeling or thinking, and they're sometimes locked into just one particular view. And so it makes for an interesting read, and it's a good way to look at the difference between tone and mood. So this is the narrator. He says, sometimes these things would make mother and father really angry. He's talking about things he's done. And they would shout at me, or they would shout at each other. Sometimes father would say, Christopher, if you do not behave, I swear I shall knock the living daylights out of you. Or mother would say, Jesus, Christopher, I'm seriously considering putting you in a home. Now, the speaker does not feel necessarily the same way as the reader feels, because in this example, the speaker is just stating this information in a matter-of-fact way, like, here is what happened, and then he quotes these people, the mom and dad, and they're saying some things that we might consider kind of horrendous. I shall knock the living daylights out of you, or I am seriously considering putting you in a home. That's terrifying, right? But the speaker doesn't feel that way. He is just saying, oh, this is sometimes what would happen. There's nothing in his language to show his tone is terrified or, scared. All right, so the tone you might describe in this case as objective, matter of fact. Sometimes these things would make them angry, and this is what they would do. It's just stating things factually without showing much feeling, right? But the way the reader feels might be more like threatening or suspenseful, hurtful. that would be the mood. So the mood of this excerpt is threatening, suspenseful, hurtful, terrifying, whereas the tone is pretty objective. Okay, so that's my quick lesson on the difference between tone and mood. Let's get back to what we're talking about. And the last question here, until we turn to the actual text, is how do I look for interesting descriptive language to analyze atmosphere? And so the first thing that you're going to want to do is to look carefully at all of the descriptive language that describes, right? These are this is going to be text that gives a mental image of something experienced. Sounds a lot like imagery, doesn't it? I think descriptive language is a bit more general of a term than imagery, but they are very close to each other. And so you're looking at the details that are included in the descriptive language, because detail focuses description, and it allows a writer to create certain feelings in the reader, and those then work towards creating meaning. And so you really have to ask yourself, what kind of details are included in the description of setting and all of the things that are happening there? Focusing on those things as you read will help you get to atmosphere. How can we do that? We can color mark like we did in 6.3. We can do the imagery activity like we did in 6.2. And maybe you're not going to use just imagery. Maybe you will use other kinds of details that describe this place and create atmosphere. But you're going to certainly look at how the different little things connect, how they fit together, how they contrast, how they create a pattern in the text. And then you'll always, always, always look for interesting uses of language. That's what it's all about with a formalist lens. We're looking for diction, imagery, tone, and structure. How do the choices at the writer's disposal work? What's interesting about them? And how do they create certain effects to create certain meaning?